Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the supposed attempts by Western governments who want to appear as if they're responding to their voting citizens, the attempts to stop or reduce or limit mass migration. The Western governments go through, or many of them go through, this ridiculous pretense that they're going to do something about it. That the voters want us to stop it and do something, and so they'll bring out a new law. They'll pretend that they're just the laws. We don't have the laws to stop the rule of law, and they pretend the rule of law guides them, which of course is utter nonsense. They're very selective which laws they want to apply and enforce, and which ones they don't. So this idea the rule of law exists is nonsense. For the globalist project to succeed, the rule of law will get in the way. If it's equally and impartially applied, then it'll slow the globalists down. So they want the law applied only when it suits them, but when it doesn't suit them, they don't want the law applied. And that's pretty much all across the Western world. Now, as an example, look at the climate change protesters blocking the roads. That's illegal. It's against the law. The police could move in and arrest them straight away, but they don't. But if a motorist or a private citizen attempts to move the illegal protesters out of the way, the police will then swoop in aggressively and they'll arrest the person that's trying to move the protesters out the way. Now, this sums up the efforts or pretend efforts around stopping mass migration. Now, I'll use Britain as an example for the moment, but the government there pretends there's an election coming up. So they're pretending that they're trying to do something about stopping illegal migration and bring mass migration under control. They want to pretend that we're trying. We've heard you people and we're trying, but the courts won't let us. The courts just won't let us. We did our best, and the court stopped us, or the House of Lords stopped us, or there was the lawyers, the human rights lawyers, they just stopped us. And look, we tried, we did our best. So why don't we just all go home and forget about it now? But we tried. Of course, that's all nonsense. There's plenty of laws, more than enough laws that are currently on the books of the British legal system where they could easily stop the boat arrivals and could easily deport people. There isn't anything they couldn't do if they wanted, but they don't apply those laws. They're strangely blind when it comes to using the laws that they already have. So instead, they'll pretend, well, we'll do a law. We go by the law here, which they don't, because they're so selective in their application of laws. So they pretend they're going to do something about it. So they'll put together some very badly worded and constructed law and then the courts will strike it down. And so would I if I saw some of the sloppy laws that they're writing and putting up. They have no intention that the law is going to become law. They're writing it, just that every word of that piece of legislation they're crafting is designed to allow even a first-year law student to point out its shortcomings, and they pretend that that's the law that they have to use to deport illegal immigrants and so on. But all the laws they already have on the books, for some reason, they don't try and apply those or use those. Now, there's a few things in this. Firstly, all the illegal and mass migrants too, it's all funded and all facilitated, enabled by the wider globalist machine. Agitators are going out into these. Remember, these people coming are illiterate peasants. They've got no concept of anything that's even 100 miles away from the village they live in. They've never moved. They've never gone more than a few miles out of the village their entire lives. And suddenly they decide to move thousands of miles across multiple countries. They haven't even a concept of what the world is like. If you listen to some of the interviews of the illiterate Pakistani peasants, as an example, or Bangladeshi peasants that that go to Europe, they're encouraged to go by United Nations agitators, and there are paid agitators running around that tell these people, oh, you can walk to England, you can walk to Europe from Pakistan. Oh, can I? Says the illiterate peasant, again, who's never been outside of their village their entire life, nor do they know someone who's been outside of the village. So then they think that just a couple of days walking away and they're in Europe. They've got no concept of time and place and distance. Is something that's beyond their comprehension. And they're helped all the way along way stations. They're helped with food and water and clothing and transport. So all the people movement is hugely facilitated by the globalist machine. So we need to understand that. And the NGOs that are, the thousands of NGOs now that are part of this globalist machine. So the people aren't arriving because they've got the means to or the ability to, or they're far from it. And if they've got the money to pay the people smugglers, it's because they're being loaned the money, which they will have to pay back once they get to France or England or somewhere like that, and they get a job in some takeout food store as a labourer or whatever for pittance wages that are also illegal, by the way. And so that's the architecture of the moving of people around. Now, once they get to England, there are plenty of laws in. I'm using England as an example. There are plenty of laws that the British government could use to expel, plenty of them, to expel these people, and they could do it. And if they wanted to, all they'd have to do is enforce existing laws. They don't have to make new laws or anything. Existing laws are more than adequate, but they don't do it. Now, when the illegals arrive, or the mass migrants, and many who claim refugee status, also the people that overstay their visas and claim refugee status, which adds more tens of thousands into the total of illegals, then they're able to stay at the taxpayer expense. And the comments the politicians saying, we can't leave them on the street, we can't deport them, we can't do what all we have to do is give them 4-star hotels with free food, free mobile phone, free spending money, and free clothing and free everything else. That's all we can do. We've got no choice. We have to do it. We are a humane society. We have to do this. And so they just assert that it must be done. We can't leave them on the street. We can't. Well, who says? You're the lawmakers, for fuck's sake. And you're saying you just can't. You're powerless. We have no power, which is, of course, ridiculous. Now, they've got plenty of power when they want to do something. If they want to break up some neo-Nazi cell, fascist Hitler swastikas, the white supremacists, they've got all the resources they need to jump on that. Look at the police resources that were available to put down the COVID demonstrations and protests. Plenty of resources there, plenty of ability to drag people into court on that one. So they're being very selective over which laws they apply. As I mentioned in the example of the climate protesters illegally blocking the roads, the police are powerless to act. There's nothing we can do. But as soon as someone gets out of their van or their car to move the protest, suddenly the police have all power, full power to act, and they act immediately and aggressively. So we clearly, laws they're really applying which laws they want to, and so all the laws have now become politicized. There is no law that is not politicized. So if you're a law-abiding white citizen, the police are all big and tough, big, hairy-chested and tough. But if you're an angry Islamic fundamentalist, in the police, all right then, sorry, we don't want to upset you. Okay, all right. So that, again, we're looking at not a double but a multiple standard and layering of the law and which laws to apply, which laws to enforce, how vigorously they should be enforced, whether the Department of Prosecutions wants to take a case up or not. All these sorts of things are hugely politicised today, and in Britain it's no different, and indeed in many other countries. So then we've got the army of NGOs. Now, if I fall foul of the law, there's no army of NGOs going to come and help me with tax-free, with pro bono. I can't get an army of lawyers to run around and look after look after my needs, but somehow these illiterate third world peasants who are illegally there anyway, somehow they can have endless amounts of representation. So now these NGOs that are activists, they're not charities. They're registered as charities, which gives them a lot of, they don't have to pay tax, and B, any donation to them is tax deductible. So they're able to command very substantial revenues from other organisations, and they cross-subsidise each other. And front organisations for George Soros donate to them, and that's a tax deduction, and so on. So it's a massive international tax scam that these NGOs are part of. Now, none of them are charities. They're not fucking charities. Not even in the slightest interpretation of the word. They're not charities. So the British government, could easily withdraw charity status, and that would make it much more difficult for these army of lawyers to operate with, provide these free services with utter impunity. The next thing is the activism in the courts. For some reason, if you want to oppose, say you get a man gets an order to pay alimony or child support. Now, it may be an egregious overstepping of any known law or legislation, but it could take him years to get the matter heard in court. If a woman's chasing alimony, then she can get a court hearing in minutes. But if a man's opposing an alimony order, it's years. He's years on a waiting list. Now, the same goes for these courts. If there's an illegal alienist being deported, somehow these lawyers, who aren't high-powered, by the way, these lawyers, supposed human rights lawyers, activists, they can get emergency court hearings with incredible swiftness and precision. They can get very sympathetic judges that get allocated to hear their case. Now, I can't do that. I can't go to a court and say, listen, I want a judge that's sympathetic to me and hostile to the other side. Can you fix it up for me? I can't get that. Neither can you. But for some reason, these people can. They always seem to get very sympathetic judges. Not every single judge is an activist, but for some reason, they are able to access the activist judges to hear the cases. Now, it happens with such frequency and such precision that it can't be an accident. It has to be something that's been orchestrated and set up. So these activist lawyers working at the activist NGOs that are pretending to be charities but are not charities are able to apply to the court and get these emergency hearings on a basis. What's the emergency? An illiterate peasant from the third world is going to be sent back to the country he came from, and that's suddenly a legal emergency that the whole court has to go into convulsions. All stops have to be pulled out. The judge gets rustled out of bed early on a Sunday morning, and I want to hear this case. It's so fucking important. Whoa. I can't get that. I can't get that sort of, and neither can you. I can't get to the service from the legal establishment, but for some reason, these people can get it. Now, also, you've got a lot of people in the administration, the government administration, that if there's a bunch of people being deported on a plane, somehow the NGOs and the media and everybody who needs to know, everyone who's opposed to it gets to know about it straight away. But the people that are, say, going to do the transporting of these people from a detention centre to the aircraft, they don't know about it till half an hour beforehand. But all the people who would oppose it all know about it. So clearly there's a communication channel directly to the entire activist cell that's coming out of the public service. Now, I don't believe that's an accident. It happens again and again and again. They seem to get warned well in advance, even if it's only a few days, and they're able to get emergency court hearings and then stays. And the government says, well, there's nothing we can do. We tried to deport them, but look, the courts won't let us. And that's just a load of bullshit. So when we look at the whole thing here, how can we, how's it possible as concerned Western citizens to stop the thing? Well, the government's controlled, the British government's controlled almost completely, if not absolutely, by the globalist cabal. So, that they can install an Indian as prime minister without even a fucking vote. I mean, that goes to show you that the two of the leading contenders for prime minister is another Indian, and then another black a black woman with dreadlocks who wasn't even brought up in the UK. Fuck. That's the control the globalists have. I mean, if you're in any doubt about who controls the British government, just look at that. The British government is controlled by the globalists. So setting that aside from that, just let's assume that the British government was even half sovereign, which it isn't, but if it was, they could just say, right, you activist NGOs, you're not charities anymore. End of that. Any activist lawyer coming here that working in the UK who isn't sworn to uphold the law or and if you're an activist, you can't practice law in this country, and so they could do anyone arrive, and there's existing laws to stop illegals arriving. Anyone that arrives will be put in this detention, and then you have the option of leaving at any time back to the country you arrived from or your country of origin, or you stay in the detention camp, and so on. And so there's a whole range of things that could be done and easily done with their existing laws, and where people smugglers, if you're aided by a people smuggler, that's against the law. You've knowingly broken the law in advance, and so on. Now, again, an infinite number of things, and do a properly worded, structured law, not the sloppy work they do. I noticed this with the Trump administration, and I think there were people inside the early Trump administration who were willfully, well, I think they were, it's obvious, they were willfully undermining the intent of the president and his policies, President Trump and his policies, and they were doing absurdly sloppily worded laws and so on that could easily be attacked by activist lawyers and torn to pieces by activist judges and so on, and they would use this sloppily worded legislation. They would get stopped, and it seemed like they were stunned, and they just sit in the middle of the road not knowing what to do, and it would take them weeks for them to regroup and organize the next move. And through this sloppiness and this badly structured, they had all these activists opposing them. They just didn't seem to know what to do. This is a little bit different in England, where I think the activism goes through the entire process. Everyone there is an activist, and I think they've made sure that pro-immigration activists are in every conceivable position and role within that entire legal and administrative and public service edifice, so that there's no one prepared to oppose it, stop it, slow walk it, limit it, or anything like that. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.